My name is Joanne O'Brien. I am the Vice President of Agile Collaboration within the TM Forum. It's my pleasure to kick off this webinar this morning. Today's webinar is the second in a series of 3 webinars which are focused on our different strategic programs which we will be looking to collaboratively develop out new assets at our Action Week event in Lisbon. Just some logistics before we kick off. The slides will be made available after the webinar, as well as a recording of the webinar will be made available to all those who registered. So, just kicking off, I want to give you a flavour of the Action Week event, how it's going to operate. It is a bit different to any event that TM Forum has ever run before. And following that, we're going to jump into a presentation by Craig Bachman, who is our Senior Director of the Open Digital Programme and Internet of Things. So this slide here that I'm sharing gives an overview, at a very macro level of course, how the event will run. So we kick off on the Monday morning with a newcomer session. This is really a hands-on one-to-one activity where we talk to all of the newcomers and look at making sure that they get the best value out of the course of the week. What are they here to achieve? We'll set them up with buddies and give them advice on how to plot out their time over the course of the week. It is, of course, much simpler this time because we have structured the event differently, and I'll show you the overall sets of streams that will happen. Then we have our opening session. This is our grand opening session. It kicks off at 9 o'clock, and we will have a strategic industry speaker, and they will give a lot of context to the changes that they are seeing within the industry. And then each of the programs that will run streams over the course of the week will outline their primary objectives and what they plan to achieve during the week. The green session here, so while a lot of teams have done a lot of analysis over recent weeks and months with regards to what is the right things for them to focus on, and that set of activities that they have set out as their ambitions has come out of a number of key activities. One was a strategic workshop which was held back in September with the board and executive committee of TM Forum. So these are people from the industry. Our board is made up of senior representatives of our member companies, as well as some other key industry players within from many different of our members. So it was their input, that strategic input, that drove the initial high-level view as to what TM Forum should focus its energies on over the next 6 to 12 months. This activity here on the green really takes that to the next level. So it evaluates, well, what are any changes that have been seen within the industry under a given topic or theme, which we'll jump into shortly, but also evaluate using user stories or business canvases, ensure that there is a clear scope and definition to all of the, I'm just going to check the questions here because in case there's a problem. Okay, ensuring that there is a clear direction and scope to the work that's being developed. It's the primary purpose being that given the pace of change really within the industry, it's important that we continuously reevaluate that. We make sure that we have enough perspectives in all of our programs to ensure that the work, when it comes out from TM Forum, that it is representative of an industry view. So that will be a structured session running through a series of business canvases, user stories, prioritization, and getting into detailed definition of what the teams will develop over the course of the week. These are organized by the streams. Both the green and this wine colored here are all part of teams, and people will be asked to decide which team they would wish to spend most of their energy on over the course of their week. Then we have a stand-up here at 11 a.m. on the Tuesday morning, and this is where each of the programs come back to the entire audience of Action Week and outline in detail what their objectives of the program is, who their first adopter is, who who's going to adopt this? Who's representative of a customer, essentially? And these people play a fundamental role in relation to validating the work. So say, for example, traditionally it would be straightforward as a communication service provider. I'm purposely using a more generic term, primarily because in the context of an open digital ecosystem, that role can come from different sources in a different context. So hence the more generic term in that situation. But it is the service provider that is representative of customers, and they play a key role with regards to direction and validation and ensuring that the work that is being developed will be adopted right into their organizations. More and more we have service providers aligning their internal R&D cycles with the work that's being created across TM Forum programs. Then we get into very active work streams where each of the leads are organizing essentially an iterative process to ensure that they're maximizing the value of everybody in their team over the course of the week. And they're driving towards first iterations or prototypes. Prototype may or may not be the right word depending on the context, but driving towards first iteration of completion of the work that they are charged by the industry to develop. And you see these blue sessions. All the blue sessions are general sessions where everybody at the action week comes back together again. So, for example, if you're primarily interested in open digital, but you like to keep an eye on what's going on the customer experience area, these are a fabulous way to stay in touch with those programs, and you can share that information with others back at your organization as well. A number of small sessions occurring then on the Friday. There's some catalyst sessions, frameworks meetings and things like that. Most of the activities do wrap up on the Thursday evening, and this is where people get the opportunity to show off really how well they've done, what they've achieved over the course of the week, and it's an opportunity for the entire audience to give feedback on the work that's been developed. This is a similar view, just taking a different approach to presenting the overall structure. So it shows that most, not all, of the programs fit into these three key strategic initiatives: customer centricity, open digital and IoT, and agile IT. The agile IT being really the backbone of TM Forum, or traditional space in relation to internal organization, open digital looking beyond the internal organization into partnering in the ecosystem, and customer centricity looking across the entire ecosystem as well as the internal organization on how to improve the overall experience of customers and how to manage and monitor that more effectively. So you see here the teams are using either user stories or business canvases to frame their event. So a lot of these topics are very, very large in nature. So you need, like a user story or business canvas to frame what it is they're working on. And then they will go through a series of reviews, validations, prioritization, and everybody at the event gets the opportunity to influence these sets of activities. And then we jump into a whole series of development activities, again broken down into iterations and retrospectives and stand-ups. So it promises to be very active, interactive, and a great opportunity to start getting involved with TM Forum collaboration. If it's something that you've been thinking about for some time and would like to basically get started on the whole activity, it's a great way to get to meet your peers across the industry and start getting a feel for how I might play a role in this in the future. Just as a reminder, all TM Forum members are members of the collaboration activity, and it's one of the key value adds as a member that you get to influence the direction of all of these programs. So please don't miss out on that. Here's a view of the programs and how they're structured across the entire event. So the colors play a role with regards to demonstrating the connectedness across key programs. So all of the green items here, CEM, analytics, metrics, and revenue management, are fundamentals under the customer centricity program. I want to draw your attention to this column here, the joint project column. One of the important messages to get out of this webinar is, one, not just to give you more information on our Open Digital program, but it's also as a preparation activity. If you're planning to attend the event, there are some items that you need to take care of before you come on site, and that is to join the specific project that you would like to be a part of at the event. So as a not-for-profit industry association where we collaboratively develop industry best practices and standards, we operate under an IPR framework, which all member companies have signed up to as part of their member registration process. And what this says basically is, when an employee of one of those companies wishes to join a project, they would register that intent to join the project, and the IP, intellectual property contact of that member company, will approve this person's ability to join. So it's not, say, me as staff or someone else on staff who would make that approval. It is somebody from your own company. So it's great to get that out of the way before you come on site. It just makes things run smoother for you, and you will end up with a better end-to-end experience. And once you get involved, once you pick the project you want to get involved with and have joined it, basically you can operate and participate as much as you feel you can over the course of the week. The other key thing I want to point out to you here is the proposed deliverables. This serves multiple purposes. Obviously, it gives an intent, gives clarity on the intent of each stream. What are they aiming to achieve? So, because we're talking about Internet of Things and Open Digital today, Craig will take us through these blue items here. So, building out the applied frameworks for IoT and industry verticals. Yesterday, we talked about customer centricity, and Rebecca was talking on how her intent is to build out an omni-channel best practice and 360 view customer. Not only does that give you a flavour as to whether this is something you have an interest in, we also work on a contribution basis. So if you as a TM4 member feel you have something significant to contribute to these areas, it's great to get that submission in ahead of time. We have many people who come to Action Week, and they are from almost every country in the world. We get a fabulous global dispersion of attendees at this event. And we have to respect the fact that not everybody is English speaking as their first language, and they like to be able to absorb and review these contributions ahead of time. So it is very important, if you plan to make a significant contribution in any of these areas, you want to write it up or submit it in some fashion, use these sets of deliverables, proposed deliverables, as a frame to evaluate whether you have a significant contribution that you would like to make or not. The closing date for contributions, these contributions, which will be reviewed at the event, is 1 week prior to the event, and that's really to give everybody an equal opportunity to evaluate those contributions ahead of time. So again, just in summary, these are all the streams. There's customer centricity, Internet of Things, Agile IT. We have a whole stream on APIs. This will work on Open Digital REST APIs. We have the NSV and Zoom program. There are three main elements to it, and then there is a whole series on foundational work, which feeds into all of these 3 business driving programs. We have a stream on privacy that will run for the whole week, and that's focused on the privacy dashboard to enable companies to do a self-assessment of their privacy readiness. And there's a number of meetings on frameworks. Frameworks is a living thing. We continuously improve it based on the requirements coming from these business-driven teams. This slide, I think, is particularly useful. We've received a lot of feedback on that in the past, so I just want to make it very clear how easy it is to access. In the TM Forum Action Week agenda website, which the link for which is on the last slide that you will receive it after the event, you see a link here, More Detailed View. And that's where you can have access to that spreadsheet, and that's continuously being built out between now and the event with additional details being added. So just a quick reminder, there are a whole series of teams that people will participate in. The request or reminder will be that do some analysis if you're planning to come to the event. Do some analysis based on the programs and the webinars that we are hosting this week to evaluate where it is you would like to contribute, and join that project ahead of time. And when you get there, you would agree basically with the team leader that this is where you intend to spend most of your week actively participating in that team. Okay, so they're the primary elements I wanted to point out to you. Now I'm going to hand over to Craig Brockman. As mentioned, he's the Senior Director for Open Digital Programme, and Craig is going to tell us all about not only the future activities but also some indication of the what assets we have available today and the overall direction of our Open Digital Programme. So over to you, Craig.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. And I will go through these relatively quickly. We're always open to questions and comments and feedback. Obviously, in a program that's dedicated to the open digital ecosystems and Internet of Things, there's many things going on, and we're very agile and responsive to marketplace conditions. So let me go through this relatively quickly. So next slide, Joanne.
Yeah, sorry. There you go.
And I'll be going through these pretty quickly. So within the forum, if you're familiar with the forum, the classic origins of telecommunications and communications service provider orientation still continues today, but there's been a significant growth in the diversity of companies that are participating in the forum, namely because of the impact of the digital services and IoT environment. So if we go to the next slide, we talk about this program really addressing very much the entire digital ecosystem. And so it includes enterprises, it includes utilities, it includes banks, it includes everyone that makes up the digital ecosystem at this point. And so when we go to the next slide, it is not necessarily a standalone program in that it just works on its own things. It borrows and does a lot of cross-team work with the other strategic programs such as Agile Business and IT, as well as customer engagement. And in doing this, in pulling together the pieces of frameworks and all of the other projects that are going on within the forum, we can bring a set of best practices and assets, models, and templates that really make sense for doing business in the digital world. Next slide, please, Joanne. And so, you know, it's probably impossible if you're on this call to not be bombarded with the Internet of Things and the amount of impact that it will have on businesses and social contact, social norms, and so on. This gets debated every day as Connected World, as shows such as CES just a few weeks ago announced hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wearable devices that will impact, some will be toys and some will have significant impact. So why do we work together on this? Well, obviously there's an enormous amount of money to be made and to be transacted. It could be as much as 7 trillion. Some people talk about up to 17 trillion. Another common message is the 20 to 50 billion devices that are being connected. And we know from working with our members that this is indeed happening, and that the key issue is that the ecosystems have become the primary model to deliver digital services. This is no longer a one company dominant type of thing, and you cannot build an ecosystem by yourself. So we are a key resource in moving everyone forward. Next slide then. So the types of issues that our members bring into the Open Digital program and from an IoT standpoint are a set of challenges, areas of risks, and business impact. While these are specifically different in industry verticals or regional areas of the world, at times all of these things do have a common set of elements, whether it's ecosystem interconnectivity, how do you transform from existing processes into a digital world? How do you support a digital experience for a customer? What do the new partnership models look like? How do you monetize this? What are the new business models? How do you look at process from a set of new business models? And how do you manage things like SLAs across an ecosystem? So these are just some of the examples and some of the things that we'll be talking about in Lisbon. Next slide then. I think what's interesting about the TM Forum's approach to this is that it's a purpose-built program for the open digital world, and we're doing this by engaging targeted industry verticals where we have connected scenarios and application areas, and we're combining this with an open digital economy set of assets, of technology assets. And so we have well over 100 participating companies in the program right now, and about 600 individuals. And so that continually grows, reflecting the interest in this area and how everyone is being impacted by a connected world in their business. Next slide then. So what you'll see in Lisbon are really three areas of interest that were represented by the blue band in Joanne's slides earlier. One is that we have enabling technology, and that's called the Open Digital Ecosystem set of technologies. They include REST-based APIs, a digital services reference architecture, and partnership assets, just among at a high level. So there's work being done in that. There's individual verticals, industry verticals, and application areas represented by things like digital health, smart grid, smart city, Internet of Things. And then the third track, which John Wilms will be talking about here in a bit, is the Digital Services Toolkit, and how that toolkit enhances the ability for all of these industry, whether they're vertical industry or cross-industry applications, to leverage frameworks and the ODE technologies. So next slide represents what the programs and the projects, the work streams, and the catalysts that will be being worked on in Lisbon and all through 2015, with Lisbon really being the kickoff point. So I've mentioned some of these already, but just to reiterate, we will have teams sitting there discussing, addressing in an agile way, moving through from use case to asset for smart city, smart energy, digital health. Connected car is just beginning, financial and banking just beginning, Internet of Things, which really has a broad spectrum of consumer, home, industrial internet use cases, as well as privacy. The toolkit, as I mentioned, I'll let John get further into that, as well as the Open Digital Ecosystem. So these three tracks within the Open Digital program really provide a really rich way of getting involved, seeing what other industries are doing in a connected world scenario, and also how to dive down deep into each one of these. So just to wrap up here, on a open digital side standpoint, we have the architecture at the top. As I mentioned, 2015 is really focused on these toolkits to enable even more rapid consuming of best practices, models, and templates. One of those is an example in the business canvas modeling. This is a new area that we're introducing, which allows us, because the ecosystems are made up of such complex business models, we've integrated business canvas modeling to help us decompose things like monetizing digital services all the way through to what processes are impacted. And John will go through a bit of that in a second here. Also want to highlight that the APIs are a key foundation to this. It's been mentioned APIs are the oxygen of the digital services IoT world, and so that continues. So we'll be having cross-team meetings that not only focus on these specific deliverables, but incorporate assets from other areas. So it really is an exciting week, and I'll let John talk about one important part of it here in terms of the toolkit.
Thanks, Greg. And if we go to the first slide of that series, we can start looking at some of the details of the Digital Services Toolkit. The basic concept here is that for many years we've had a very rich collection of assets, as we show on the right, with the components, which are based on and include many of the parts of frameworks that a lot of you are probably familiar with, like process elements, data elements, metrics, and APIs. But we haven't had a way to easily get from a specific business problem to the collection of specific frameworks assets that solve that problem. And that's really the purpose of the Digital Services Toolkit. So the basic idea is that in addition to the already rich collection of components and links between components that we have today, as shown on the right, we're going to add a large number of business contexts, as shown on the left, and link from those into those components. The next slide shows how this works in a specific case. So here we have a consumer who has a specific business problem, and they're able to index into this Digital Services Toolkit by means of the problem statements, by means of specific business model canvases, and by means of business scenarios. That narrows down the linkage to just the portions of frameworks that are actually relevant to that particular business problem. So the following slides will show a little bit more detail about how that works. On the next slide, we show how a problem statement is constructed. So this is a classic formulation, and we're just using an example here that we have built out to help educate people on how to use the system. So this particular example may not be in your area, but it just shows how it works. So this is an example where a communication service provider wants to partner with a public transport company to offer internet service on board the transport. The next slide shows how this fleshes out a little bit more in a business model canvas. For those of you who have not seen a business model canvas before, this is rapidly becoming the standard way to define business problems and how value is provided in solving a business problem. So it really focuses people's attention on defining the resources, activities, partners, what value proposition is actually being offered, who are the customers, how are they segmented, how is the value being offered, and then it provides a cost and revenue analysis. Literally millions of people have downloaded the materials for this, and it's, as I say, it's rapidly becoming the standard way of representing this kind of information. So we're facilitating that in the Digital Services Toolkit, along with some additional value links to make it easier for people to enter this information. The next slide shows how this goes down to yet another level of detail. Here we have a business scenario covering the same business problem. This is one half of the value proposition, which is the Internet onboard sponsoring. Here we have a business scenario which breaks down into a set of use cases. And the use cases are related to the primary stakeholders who are represented in the business model canvas. So what we're able to do with the combination of problem statement, business model canvases, and business scenario is to clearly represent a business problem that someone's trying to solve, the primary stakeholders involved, their particular views of the business value, which may be different, and that's okay, but we want to capture all those. And then the business scenario that links all those together. This gives us a critical linkage point from which we can go further into the framework. So now we have a collection of use cases that provide that downward linkage. So if we can go to the next slide. This shows a little bit more detail on how this works. Up on top in the context, in the top left, we show the problem statements, business model canvases, and business scenarios that we just looked at a moment ago that we saw some examples of, and then down into the use cases in the center right of the diagram. From those use cases, we can link to sequence diagrams that describe the operation of the use case from the point of view of a person who's saying, here's what happens next, here's the next step in the process. We can also link to standardized process flows, many of which have already been developed in the business process framework of the frameworks set. So we can link it to different kinds of descriptions of those use cases. From there, we can also link down further, as we show on the lower right, into collections of actual process elements which have already been defined. We may also identify additional new process elements and add those into frameworks. We can also link to touch points, which represent the linkages between organizational processes. So if I have, in our example that we looked at a moment ago, a communication service provider who's doing operations with a transport provider, there are going to be touch points at which their public processes interact, places where they're going to exchange information, requests, and status updates, where their internal processes are linked to each other. And so those are the touch points. Those are then related to APIs. There are other types of frameworks assets that we're not showing on this diagram for clarity. This is really focused on what we're trying to develop at Action Week. So there will also be information elements from the information framework, metrics, and so on. But we're focusing mainly on building out as large of a collection of contexts as we can. So if we can look at the next slide. I think this will probably wrap up the discussion. And essentially what we're showing here is the playbook for Action Week, the priority order in which we'll construct the definitions of contexts, then go down further into linkages to use case sequences and process flows and their component process elements, and then lastly, time permitting, into touch points and APIs. Again, with the focus on building out as rich a collection as possible of contexts, because that's the business point of view that helps people link into this. So back to you, Craig.
Yeah, I'd just like to emphasize that what John presented is being integrated across all of the Internet of Things verticals. And so we have been using business canvases approach in digital health and smart grid and IoT over the last 2 years. And so we continue to see value in this process and the ability to create more relevant assets quicker that can be used both in vertical industry applications such as connected car to cross-industry ecosystem examples such as smart city that really integrates things like transportation and public services and so on. This is really an exciting way of merging all of the assets and all of the investment that your organizations have made in frameworks and the open digital assets and putting them into commercial applications, commercial solutions, commercial standard solution sets that really can be showcased around the world beyond the TM Forum. So these are all the types of things that we'll be discussing next week. So again, the work streams for each of the verticals, the cross-industry, as well as the digital services toolkit, the catalysts that have been proposed for each of these areas, the So what I suggest is if you're interested in any of these areas, there's the link on the screen for the Open Digital Ecosystem. There's a link on the screen for discussions of the industry verticals and connected scenarios, including IoT. There's, if you want to go look at some of the materials that were generated for digital disruption in San Jose that just passed. We had some great presentations on Open Digital and IoT, some 40 plus, as well as an interactive workshop. Those materials are available online, as well as I'd point you to our Quick Insights research. We've just released a smart grid publication, and there is a whole library of information there, as well as some previous webinar material available, as well as a video describing all of this. So lots of material out there. I hope to see you in Lisbon.
Thank you, Craig and John. That was a very interesting and detailed overview of the Open Digital Programme and the activities at Action Week. So just if people are interested in getting involved, or like what kind of considerations do they need to have with regards to expertise? Do they have to be an expert in IoT or M2M? What would you recommend?
We welcome everyone. As John walked through our agile process of collecting this, we found that our most successful groups are a mix of people. Some are product management folks that are launching digital services. Some are founders of Internet of Things startups. And they bring kind of a new perspective on the business models. Those people are joined by system integrators, consultants, folks that understand how to put together these complex ecosystems. And then we're joined by people that are very familiar with frameworks, that are very familiar with business modeling, and then deeper into process modeling, APIs, and putting together end-to-end ecosystem, for digital services. So this really means that our most successful projects represent an end-to-end view of the different roles. So please do not feel that if you only know the business side and not the technology side, that there's not a place for you. It becomes a very good diverse room of people who bring the best of their roles to each of these projects.
Thanks, Craig. And I mean, you have focused on the kind of industry vertical aspect and the business driving aspects. What about telecommunications providers and their vendors? Where is their role in helping to shape this?
We've had incredible participation and champion from CSPs all along in the program. They pick any of the digital services areas and any of the verticals, and communications is obviously a key aspect of that. And so from participation of CSPs and their suppliers, this has been a very key piece of the program to date. And we see great things when we get industry vertical specific people joined with the CSPs, joined with the frameworks experts. Great things happen.
Excellent. Thanks, Craig. That's really great. So as a final wrap-up, I want to thank everybody for their time today. Thank Craig and John particularly for giving us their time to outline their program and the activities that they're planning to run at Action Week. The slides will be made available after the webinar, as well as the recording of the webinar. The link to the Action Week web page is shown here on the last slide. And one final reminder to join the specific project that you feel is the place that you can add the most value, or the place that you can get the most value back into your organization. So do take the little bit of time to do those preparatory activities, and your experience at the event should really provide dividends back to you and your organization. Thanks everybody for your time. Look forward to seeing those of you who decide to come to Action Week. See you there. Bye-bye.